Psalm 138. I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. Before the gods I will sing your praise. I will bow down toward your holy temple and will praise your name for your love and your faithfulness, for you have exalted above all things your name and your word. When I called, you answered me. You made me bold and stout-hearted. May all the kings of the earth praise you, O Lord, when they hear the words of your mouth. May they sing of the ways of the Lord, for the glory of the Lord is great. Though the Lord is on high, he looks upon the lowly, but the proud he knows from afar. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you preserve my life. You stretch out your hand against the anger of my foes. With your right hand you save me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands.
Our scripture lesson today comes from the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, chapter 5, verses 1 through 30. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded that the gold and silver vessels which Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, be brought to him, that the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the golden vessels and were taken out of the temple of God's house, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of bronze, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand came out and wrote near the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's face was changed in him, and his thoughts troubled him, and the joints of his thighs were loosened, and his knees struck one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing and could not make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, and his face was changed in him, and his lords were perplexed. The queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. The queen spoke and said, "O king, live forever. Don't let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your face be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. The king Nebuchadnezzar, your father, yes, the king your father, made him master of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Because an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting of dreams, showing of dark sentences, and dissolving of doubts were found in that same Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation." Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, "Are you that Daniel of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Judah? I have heard of you, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light, understanding, and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing. But I've heard of you that you can give interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered before the king, "Let your gifts be to yourself, and give your reward to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. You, king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father the kingdom and greatness and glory and majesty. Because of the greatness that he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and language trembled and feared before him. He killed whom he wanted to, and he kept alive whom he wanted to. He raised up whom he wanted to, and put down whom he wanted to. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. He was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the animals, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of the sky, until he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and that he sets up over it whomever he will. You, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you. And you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. You have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which don't see or hear or know. And you have not glorified the God in whose hands your breath is, and those are all your ways. When the part of the hand was sent before him, and this writing was inscribed. This is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, mene, tekel, piz. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God has counted your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you are weighed in the balance and are found wanting. Piz, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar commanded, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain. The word of God for the people of God. Many phrases from the Bible have become part of the English language today. Such phrases as eat, drink, and be merry out of Ecclesiastes, or they are a law unto themselves out of Romans. The last one, by the way, is misinterpreted quite a bit. People think what Paul is saying, people who are a law upon themselves can do whatever they want. That's not what he means. He actually says that They know God's law in their hearts. They do it themselves, even though they haven't studied the law. Jesus has a number of great phrases. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, and don't cast pearls before swine. And the handwriting on the wall, even though technically not quite in the Bible, is a phrase from the Bible, from this very story. In the story, we have the king of Babylon, Belshazzar. He's a young king. His father had been the great king Nebuchadnezzar. And Belshazzar is throwing a party for his friends and lords, the rulers of the kingdom of Babylon. And as he throws this party, he suddenly remembers the gold and silver vessels, the sacred vessels that his father had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. And he orders them to be brought before the guest there at the party. And there in this common party, they drink wine to the various gods of Babylon. And as they're rejoicing and mocking the god who these silver and gold and bronze vessels were meant to honor, suddenly a hand appears, a disembodied hand, and it begins to write upon the walls of the palace. Well, that would be a shocking sight for any of us to see. And it brought the party to an abrupt close, and we hear that Belshazzar becomes frightened. His joints become weak, his knees knock as he sees this ghostly and memorable event. So he calls in the wise men of Babylon and he asks them, what does this say? What is this saying there on the wall? And none of them could read it. And suddenly the king's wife remembers that there was one Daniel, now an old man, probably, fairly old man, who had interpreted dreams for Belshazzar's father, Nebuchadnezzar. And he is called in and said, if you can interpret the writings on the wall, I will make you third ruler of the kingdom. I'll give you fine clothing and gold to wear. And Daniel says, keep your reward. I don't want that stuff, but I will interpret the writing for you because you didn't show the respect to God that he deserves. Instead, you honored the gods of your kingdom that know nothing, like your father had done before. This very night your kingdom shall come to an end. You are found wanting before God. And Belshazzar, according to the scriptures, at least kept his word. No doubt he was not happy to hear those words. And he gives purple clothing to Daniel. A gold chain is put around his neck. And that very night, Belshazzar died. His kingdom was overthrown and divided between the Persians and the Medes. This is a warning not just to any old king, Yes, kings need to revere God, but it's a warning to us that we need to remember what is sacred and what is common. Belshazzar's crime was that he mocked God by bringing in the gold and silver and bronze vessels that were meant to be used to worship and honor God. And he used them instead to praise the gods of material, of bronze and gold and silver and wood. Not true gods at all. They were used to worship fake gods while ignoring the true God, the God that actually gave breath to him and his kingdom. It's a warning, though, also to us that we need to keep what is sacred, sacred. Well, recently I heard of a couple churches that have been vandalized in our area. One, apparently somebody broke in and with muddy shoes ran up and down the church and ran across the pews and just made a mess of things. Another had windows broken. And in both these cases, nothing was stolen that I know of, but people profaned the place where people come to worship God. People profane God all the time. They use God's name in vain. Now, I don't recommend this, but just using bad words every day is not a sin. It may be rude, maybe inconsiderate, but just using bad words in and of themselves are not a sin, except for two cases. When you profane God's name, when you use God's name in vain, that is a sin. And when you use those swear words against other people, that is a sin. Because we are all creatures of God. We've been created by God in God's image. And when we curse people, when we belittle people, when we ignore people, that is the greatest profaning of God, because we are profaning his image here upon earth. In our culture today, we belittle people. I hear it all the time on the news. I hear it in the streets. I hear it in the stores. I sometimes even hear it in the church. How we can belittle people. We can profane people, forgetting that they are created in the image of God. We must always remember to honor God, to give him the respect that he deserves, the respect that he desires from us. And one way we can do that is by helping people, by treating people as equals. And when we profane the people around us, we profane God. Take time this week. Look around you. remember those people. Even though we might not like them, we are called on to love them. Not for what they do, but because they are God's creation. Because they are part of the world and the universe that God has made. And even though it's difficult to see at times, they too reflect the image of God. Worship God this week by not profaning his work, the people around us this week.